Morning, Gus. So I was looking, it looked like you were on a VTOL for the Open VTOL um, project, Open Aero VTOL project. So I'm assuming you know about that. iNAV, no other flight software I know of supports VTOL just yet. iNAV is in the works of adding VTOL support, but what you're trying, I think, is um, pushing the envelope for where the hobby is right now. Not that people aren't doing it, but they're coding things themselves, and they're real deep into it, much farther than I am. I don't know how to code into a flight controller certain parameters and software. I really just know mostly about how to use the stuff that other people are creating. For arming, I can help you there though, and a lot of the stuff for any of the flight controllers, like iNAV, anything that's a fork of CleanFlight, which is the basis of this. So just a little bit of history with, Multi was the first flight controller software out there on a widespread use for multi-rotors. Then there was other ones like LibrePilot and open source. The mainstream one, though, that forked off of all those was CleanFlight. So that was developed by Dominic and is on GitHub, which is a repository for open source software. Forked off of that was Betaflight and iNAV. iNAV's focus is autonomous flight with GPS, and Betaflight's focus is racing quadcopters. iNAV has recently pushed into plane support in a big way, so you can easily fly an airplane if the transmitter signal is lost, or you flip a switch, it will fly back to you automatically using the GPS, and then it will loiter. It'll just fly a circle around you, or try to land, but I don't know that people use that successfully. I mean, landing a plane is not something that's easily done just on GPS. You need a lot of sensors to do that. But it will come down. Gravity makes sure it will hit the ground eventually. So I use the loiter personally. I would think you'd start on airplane general. There's a couple things that you can check out. Obviously, that sets up your configuration in this manner here. And you can see that there's two motors, so that could do your motors on the wings for your VTOL. You could set up another motor to mimic those, so you could ramp up all three, or another output to mimic, so you could ramp up all three at the same time. But you need way more than that. You need gyro stabilization on these two outboard motors, which that's the whole trick with VTOL. And that's what I don't know how to do, and I don't think iNAV supports that yet. But looking at this, if I go to my modes for arming, you said you had trouble arming. I guess let me flip back real quick. If you go to the configuration tab, or I'm sorry, the setup tab, in iNAV, all these checkboxes need to be green before it will allow you to arm. Arming is generally done on a stick, on a switch I mean, so I can show you that in a second. If you do not have a GPS or a magnometer or a barometer set up, you need to set them to none for magnometer. Barometer would be set to none, and then turn off your GPS as well. And then those will take those out of the mix. Those have to obviously be off. And then also for modes, you will need to go into here. You would set up your modes to follow. You hit add range to add arming, and then you would set this to a certain channel on your radio, and what would do is, as you would flip that switch, you will see that little indicator move, and as that indicator moves, you have to have this graphic over top of where that indicator will be, and then that would allow the quadcopter or the airplane to arm, motors to arm after that. So you could have that on a double switch, so you can add as many ranges here as you'd like. So you'd have to be like, you could say, okay, well, that to meet this condition, you have to have channel 5 be within this band, and then also channel 6 within this band as well. So we'll only meet the arming condition now if both of those are met. So that's how you can do it on 2 switches instead of 1. Obviously you have to hit save, I'm not going to do that. And then you can add overlapping modes, so I can have this, I could set this to channel 5 so that, if I arm, it would be in, not that I would do this, but it would be in arming mode and iNAV altitude hold at the same time, since they're following both channel. So I can have it, you can overlap modes as well. So it's very versatile. You can see some of the things I have here are with this mode. Let me just click back. So if you don't hit save, it doesn't save. So if I click back out of there, so if I have on channel 6, if I have 2 switches down, I'm in altitude hold and position hold mode, which basically makes the craft loiter wherever I'm at. It flies I think it's a 400-meter circle. If I flip up this switch, now I'm just in position hold mode, or I'm sorry, altitude hold mode. So it just holds a certain altitude, and then I can turn left and right, and it will automatically keep that same altitude. And it's doing that all through the GPS, or you can do it through a barometer. So that's what iNAV is all about. And then if I would be armed and hit this switch, then it's going to do the overriding return to home mode, and then that will bring the craft wherever it's at. If I lose line of sight or lose visual, it will bring it back and loiter around where I launched it from. So that's the modes. It's pretty straightforward on different channels. What you can also do is set up your servos. So you have the 0 through 7, so don't ignore the 0. And I know you look like you have some experience with that. So for example, I can have servo 7, turn some of this other stuff off. I can have servo 7 follow my throttle inputs. So 1 and 2 are following the throttle inputs, although it doesn't show here because they're a motor output, not a servo. And now 7 is following that. So that could drive your nitro motor. However, that will get all 3 motors to spin up at the same time. That's fine, but you really need more than that, and that's where I think iNAV's going to fall short. So to do that, I really just put on servo 6 because it starts at 0. See, there's a lot of number changes here that are difficult, but obviously servo 6 would follow channel 4, and channel 4, if I go to receivers tab, is 1, 2, 3, 4 is my throttle. So that's how that's working. So hopefully it gives some insight. Another thing you should check out is this Painless 360 motor mixing. Hold on a second. So I don't know if you've watched this video yet, but I think you've mentioned Painless 360 as a YouTube source. Check that out. He does a great lesson on how to set up servos and motor mixing. And maybe through this knowledge base, there's a way to have your gyro stabilization done on your motors. You'd have to really look at it because it has the different servo slots and then the different PID outputs essentially, because you have stabilization roll, stabilization pitch, stabilization yaw. So you might be able to program in to motor 1 and 2 the stabilization. I don't know if it's roll or yaw. There's a lot of videos out there. There's another gentleman that's doing this with his YouTube channel is iForce2D, not nearly as popular, but look him up. He did something, I think it was in August of 2017 on VTOL, but it wasn't, none of these guys are showing the programming, how they're actually doing the software. They're showing the flight experience, which is great, but the programming is what I couldn't find anything out there. And I haven't really looked into this open aerial VTOL software at all. It looks like you have. I've seen you're on the discussion, the forum groups there recently. So that's something. Hopefully this gives you some sort of somewhere to look at least, and gives you a little bit on iNAV. I think iNAV will do everything you want it to do as of right now with its base software. It's the VTOL thing that it's missing, because I don't know how you would transition it. So I think you can set up those motors, honestly, with stabilization using this information, servo mixing. And you can see here's the name of the video, so you can search for that. Now he did it for VTOL, but I think you could still customize that for your motors. The problem is, I don't know how you turn that off. And that's what I think iNAV's missing. So you're going to want to have it act like a quadcopter. I don't know how the nitro engine fits into that, because you're saying it's 25% of or a third of the upthrust is from that. So is that pointing up too? I don't get that part. You'd have to upload a graphic or something of what you're trying to do, like a drawing of what this plane's going to look like or what it currently looks like. And then, you know, a nitro engine or a motor, I don't think the software knows or makes a difference, because it's still using PWM signals to drive these things. So a PWM signal to a nitro motor just moves a servo, the other one is just it's an ESC. It's all the same. So I don't think that's an issue. You can get the nitro motor now. It's not going to be able to throttle up because it doesn't have active braking like a motor does. That's going to be an issue. If your nitro motor is a part of your stabilization in VTOL when it's trying to do a vertical takeoff, I don't think that's going to be able to be possible to produce a correct result. I just don't think the engine can react fast enough to throttle down, because motors have active braking in BL Heli, which sounds like you're all over BL Heli, so you're aware. So with that aside, say it was just 3 motors. I think you could say it's just 3 motors. I think you could possibly get it done, even though iNAV doesn't directly support it, through the motor mixing for takeoff and VTOL with stabilization and all that jazz. I just don't know how you transition out of that to turn it off, because it's going to, you know, you can get your wings or stuff to sweep forward, but how do you say, okay, sweep that forward, now turn that off, keep them forward, and now instead of the left to right acting on the motors, it's going to act on the ailerons. You need a mode, you need a switch to do that, and it doesn't have that mode yet. There was some recent comments in the iNAV about it. You know, this is the latest version of iNAV. If I go down to the bottom, so it's on 1.8, and some new features that were added in was 2 banks of PIDs for fixed wings and multi-craft, a small step toward VTOL support. So this is what they're getting at. You know, you'd have to have a different set of PID loops for the ailerons versus the motors, and turn one set off in a different mode. So it's not there yet. As of right now, that's what I'm thinking about. Like, how do you turn that off? Because if you wouldn't, the motors can drive forward, but when you would bank right, your aileron's going to want to push it right, but then your motors are going to want to do stuff too, and they're going to be facing forward. So I don't think those 2 things, they might fight each other. Yeah, because your roll becomes your yaw, and vice versa. So it just, I think that gets difficult. So that's where I'm at. Hope this helps some. See ya.